The sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the streets of Washington, D.C. Inside the gilded halls of the Trump residence, the world seemed quiet. But outside, a young girl, no more than 12, stood trembling on the doorstep. Her small fists clenched around a worn piece of paper. When the towering figure of Donald J. Trump appeared at the door, her words struck like a thunderclap. "Mr. Trump, can you save us? In my neighborhood, girls like me, we're not safe. No one listens. Will you?" Her voice, a mix of fear and desperate hope, pierced through his guarded heart. For the first time in years, the former president found himself staring into the eyes of innocence, carrying a burden far too heavy for her tiny frame. What he did next would change not only her life but the fabric of the nation itself. The grand mansion in Washington, D.C., stood like a fortress of wealth and power, its golden facade gleaming in the early evening light. Inside, Baron Trump sat in the expansive library, flipping through a book on world history. His father, Donald J. Trump, was in his office nearby, engrossed in his paperwork. The tranquil evening was interrupted by a soft knock at the front door, hesitant yet determined. Maria, the family's longtime housekeeper, opened the door to find a young girl standing on the marble steps. Her clothes were worn, her hair slightly unkempt, and her hands tightly clutched a crumpled piece of paper. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old, yet her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen far too much of life's hardships. "Is Mr. Trump home?" the girl asked, her voice trembling. Maria hesitated for a moment, her maternal instincts kicking in as she noted the girl's vulnerability. "Who shall I say is asking for him?" Maria inquired gently. I'm Lucy," the girl replied, her gaze darting nervously toward the street as if expecting someone to appear. "I need to speak with him. Please." Maria hesitated for a moment before closing the door behind her and escorting the girl inside. "Wait here," she said, motioning toward the grand foyer. The girl nodded, her hands still gripping the piece of paper as if it were a lifeline. Minutes later, Donald Trump appeared, his imposing figure commanding the room. He looked at the young girl curiously, his eyebrows slightly raised. "What's this about?" he asked in a tone that was firm yet not unkind. Lucy swallowed hard, her small hands trembling as she extended the crumpled paper toward him. "Please, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need your help." Trump took the paper and unfolded it. As his eyes scanned the words, his expression shifted from curiosity to a mix of disbelief and concern. The note detailed horrifying statistics about the rise of violent crimes, particularly assaults against young girls, in certain parts of the country. Scrawled at the bottom in shaky handwriting were the words, "We need someone to protect us. Can you help us?" Baron had wandered out of the library, drawn by the unusual commotion. He stopped at the edge of the foyer, watching the scene unfold. His eyes met Lucy's, and he felt an inexplicable pull of empathy. She seemed so small, so vulnerable, and yet so brave to come here alone. Trump looked down at Lucy, his usually unshakable demeanor softened by the weight of her plea. "Who wrote this?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "I did," Lucy replied, her gaze unwavering despite the tears brimming in her eyes. "And I'm not the only one. There are so many girls like me, scared every day. We don't know who else to turn to." Baron stepped forward, his young voice breaking the heavy silence. "Dad, we have to do something," he said, his tone resolute. Trump glanced at his son, then back at Lucy. "You're brave to come here," he said, his voice carrying a newfound respect. "But this isn't something I can fix overnight. It's going to take more than just words on paper." Lucy nodded, her lower lip quivering. "I know," she whispered. "But someone has to start somewhere." Trump sighed deeply, folding the paper and slipping it into his pocket. "All right," he said. "Let's figure this out. But first, you're going to sit down, have something to eat, and tell us everything." Maria reappeared, leading Lucy toward the dining room. Baron lingered behind, his mind already racing with ideas. He didn't know how, but he was determined to help Lucy, and others like her, find the safety and justice they deserved. Lucy sat in the dining room, her small frame dwarfed by the grand table that stretched endlessly. The ornate chandelier above seemed to highlight her unease, her tiny fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. Baron Trump entered the room quietly, his steps soft but purposeful, as if trying not to disturb the delicate tension in the air. "Hi," Baron said, his voice calm and warm. He pulled out a chair beside her and sat down. "I'm Baron. You're Lucy, right?" Lucy nodded hesitantly, her big brown eyes scanning the room before landing on Baron. "Yes. I didn't mean to cause any trouble," she whispered. Baron smiled gently. "You didn't. I heard what you told my dad. You're really brave for coming here." Before Lucy could respond, the door opened, and Donald Trump stepped in, accompanied by Maria. The former president's presence filled the room, but his expression was surprisingly soft. He sat at the head of the table, motioning for Maria to leave. "So, Lucy," Trump began, his tone firm but not unkind, "you came all this way to talk to me. Tell me what's going on." Lucy swallowed hard. I live in a small town in Indiana. My parents," her voice broke for a moment, but she steadied herself. "They work hard, but it's not safe anymore. There are bad people everywhere. My friend, she was hurt. Really bad. And no one's doing anything to stop it." Baron leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "Hurt? What happened?" Tears welled up in Lucy's eyes as she clutched the crumpled paper she'd brought. She was attacked walking home from school. The police said they'd help, but nothing happened. They just said it's how things are now. Trump's jaw tightened. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "Lucy," Trump said, his voice low, "I'm sorry for what your friend went through. No child should ever feel unsafe. But why come to me? I'm not president anymore." Lucy looked up at him, her eyes shining with determination. "Because you always said you'd protect us. You always said America should be safe for everyone. I believed you." The words hung in the air, striking a chord deep within Donald Trump. Baron turned to his father. "Dad, we have to do something. She came all this way because she believed in you. We can't just send her home without helping." Trump's eyes softened as he looked at his son, then back at Lucy. "I'm not in the White House anymore, but that doesn't mean I've stopped caring about this country. If I can help, I will." Lucy's face lit up with hope. "Really?" Trump nodded. "Yes, but it's not just about me. Baron and I will need your help too. We'll look into your town, figure out what's going on, and see what we can do to make it safe again." Baron smiled at Lucy. "You've already taken the first step by speaking up. That's the hardest part. Now, let's work together to make things right." Lucy nodded, her fear replaced by a flicker of hope. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was truly listening. As the three of them sat together, the beginnings of a plan started to take shape, a plan that would test their resolve and bring them face to face with the dangers lurking in the shadows of small-town America. This was no longer just Lucy's fight, it was now theirs too. The days that followed Lucy's visit to Mar-a-Lago were a whirlwind of activity. Baron Trump, deeply moved by the girl's courage, felt a growing sense of responsibility to act. His father, though famously confident and assertive, appeared uncharacteristically reflective. It wasn't just a political issue to him, it was personal now. "We need to start with her town," Barron said during breakfast one morning, his voice steady. "It's where she feels unsafe, and it's where her story began." Donald Trump nodded, putting down his cup of coffee. "We'll organize a task force. But this can't just be about one town. We'll need to send a message, loud and clear, that safety comes first in every corner of this country." Barron, however, had a different vision. "Dad, people are tired of politicians making promises they don't keep. What if we go there ourselves? Meet the people, hear their stories, and figure out what's really happening." The suggestion took Donald by surprise. His instinct had always been to command from the top, but his son's idea had merit. "All right," he said after a pause. "We'll go. But this has to be well organized. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." The next week, the Trump convoy arrived in the small, struggling town of Clearhaven. Media cameras flashed, capturing the spectacle of SUVs and security teams, but Barron's focus was elsewhere. He scanned the faces of the townspeople who had gathered near the town hall, noting their mix of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. Lucy was there, standing with her mother. She waved timidly as Barron spotted her and approached. "Hi, Lucy," he said warmly. "We're here to help, just like we promised." She smiled, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside the town hall, Barron and Donald held a meeting with local officials, law enforcement, and community leaders. As the discussions unfolded, a troubling pattern began to emerge. Underfunded police departments, understaffed schools, and a general sense of neglect had created an environment where crime thrived. Barron listened intently, taking notes and asking questions. "What do you need most right now?" he asked a weary-looking police chief. "Resources," the chief replied. "We don't have the manpower or the technology to keep up. And people are too afraid to speak out, which makes it even harder." Donald Trump leaned forward. "Well, that's going to change. I'm committing funding for better equipment and additional officers. But it's not just about policing. We need to rebuild this community from the ground up." After the meeting, Barron wandered the streets of Clearhaven with Lucy as his guide. She pointed out places that had once been safe but were now avoided: an abandoned playground, a graffiti-covered school building, a dimly lit alley where her friend had been attacked. "This isn't just about safety," Barron said, his voice tinged with frustration. "It's about giving people a reason to believe in their community again." Lucy nodded. "It's hard to feel safe when everything around you feels broken." Barron paused, looking at her thoughtfully. "Lucy, what would make you feel safe again? If you could change one thing, what would it be?" She hesitated, then said, "I just want people to care. Not just about themselves, but about each other." Her words stayed with Barron as they returned to the town hall. He shared her sentiment with his father that evening. "Dad, this isn't just about crime statistics or funding. It's about people feeling like they matter," Barron said. "If we can't fix that, then nothing else we do will stick." Donald Trump regarded his son with a mixture of pride and respect. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Barron. Let's figure out how to make them feel like they matter." The next morning, the Trumps unveiled a comprehensive plan for Clearhaven. It included immediate funding for law enforcement, investments in education and community centers, and a long-term strategy to attract businesses back to the area. But it was Barron's idea that truly captured the town's imagination: a volunteer program called Neighbor Watch, designed to foster a sense of collective responsibility and care. As they stood on the steps of the town hall, addressing the crowd, Barron spotted Lucy in the front row. She looked up at him with the same mix of hope and determination she had shown during their first meeting. "We're not just here to fix problems," Barron said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We're here to remind each other that we're stronger together. Change starts with us, and it starts today." The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in years, Clearhaven felt a spark of hope. The Oval Office was silent except for the faint rustle of papers on President Trump's desk. The room, often bustling with aides and advisors, now held an air of stillness that mirrored the weight of the matter at hand. Barron's voice echoed in Donald's mind, "Dad, she's not just a victim. She's a symbol of something much bigger." The president's expression was uncharacteristically solemn. His hands clasped tightly as he leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. It had been hours since he and Barron had listened to the heart-wrenching testimony of Lily, the 12-year-old girl whose bravery had pierced through layers of bureaucracy and political formality. Lily's story wasn't just another statistic, it was a mirror reflecting the cracks in the system. She had described the fear, the helplessness, and the absence of safeguards that left vulnerable individuals at the mercy of predators. But amidst her pain, there was resilience, a spark of hope that change was possible. Barron entered the room, his face lit with determination. "Dad, I think we need to do something now. Not tomorrow. Now." Donald turned to his son, noting the fire in his eyes. It wasn't often that Barron spoke with such conviction, but when he did, it was impossible to ignore. "Barron," Donald began, his voice steady yet soft, "change isn't as simple as making a speech. It's policy. It's collaboration. It's getting people on board." Barron shook his head, his youthful idealism refusing to yield to political pragmatism. "But it starts with action, Dad. If you don't take the first step, who will?" The president stared at his son for a long moment, the weight of responsibility colliding with the urgency of a moral obligation. Later that day, a special meeting was called in the Roosevelt Room. Advisors, legal experts, and representatives from organizations fighting child exploitation gathered. The president and Barron were at the helm of the discussion. "We need a national initiative," Donald declared, his voice firm. "A task force focused on prevention, education, and enforcement. And it starts now." Barron sat beside him, quietly observing as professionals debated strategies. Though he wasn't actively contributing, his presence was a reminder of why this effort was urgent. After the meeting, Barron approached Lily, who had been invited to witness the initial steps of the initiative. She was seated on a plush couch, her small frame dwarfed by the grandeur of the White House. "Lily," Barron said softly, sitting down beside her, "I know this won't fix everything overnight, but we're going to try. You've done something amazing today." Lily looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "Do you think it'll really help? Or is this just talk?" Barron hesitated for a moment before replying. "I can't promise that everything will be perfect, but I can promise we won't stop trying. You made us see what we couldn't ignore. That means something." As the sun set over the White House, the seeds of change had been planted. Barron watched from a balcony, his thoughts racing. This was just the beginning. The scene was far from over, the battle against a flawed system would be long and arduous. But with Lily's courage, Barron's persistence, and Donald Trump's platform, there was hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to start a revolution. The White House buzzed with activity as Barron Trump prepared to launch the initiative that Lily had inspired. Late-night meetings, strategy sessions, and policy drafts consumed the West Wing. Barron, however, was not content with sitting in the shadows. He had decided to play an active role in crafting a solution. One evening, Barron sat in the Roosevelt Room with a group of legal experts, social workers, and activists. His voice, steady yet tinged with youthful urgency, broke through the usual diplomatic tone of the room. "This isn't just about drafting policies," he said. "We need to listen. We need to hear the stories that are hidden in the shadows." The experts exchanged skeptical glances, but Barron's resolve was unshaken. "How do we protect someone like Lily if we don't understand what they face every day?" he pressed. His words carried the weight of someone who had been moved by the raw truth of Lily's plea. Determined to gain first-hand insight, Barron proposed an idea that shocked everyone in the room: a visit to communities where these problems were most prevalent. His father, initially resistant, finally relented after witnessing his son's unwavering determination. "Fine," Donald Trump said, his tone a mixture of pride and concern. "But you'll have Secret Service coverage everywhere you go." The following week, Barron, accompanied by a team of social workers and a small entourage, visited a women's shelter in New York City. The atmosphere was tense yet hopeful. Women and children sat in small groups, their stories etched into their faces. Barron walked among them, listening intently to their fears and dreams. A middle-aged woman named Carla caught his attention. "I used to think no one cared," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But seeing someone like you here gives me hope." Her words resonated deeply with Barron, reinforcing his commitment. As the visit progressed, Barron spoke with a teenage girl named Mia, who shared a harrowing story of survival. Her courage left a lasting impression on him. That evening, back in his hotel room, Barron recorded a video message. "To every survivor, your voice matters. We're listening, and we're going to fight for you," he said, his voice firm and sincere. The video went viral overnight. Social media lit up with messages of support and skepticism alike. Critics called it a publicity stunt, but those who had met Barron in person knew better. His sincerity was undeniable. Back in the White House, Barron presented his findings to his father and the team of advisors. "We're not just fighting statistics," he said. "We're fighting for real people. For Carla, for Mia, for Lily, and for everyone who deserves to feel safe." The room fell silent as Barron's words sank in. Even Donald Trump, who had weathered countless debates and political storms, found himself moved. "All right," he said finally. "Let's make this initiative count." That evening, Barron stood on the balcony of the White House, looking out over Washington, D.C. The city lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the countless lives his efforts might touch. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose, knowing that his actions were paving the way for change. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about creating a legacy of hope and protection for all. Barron Trump's video message spread like wildfire across social media. Within hours, it was shared by celebrities, activists, and influencers worldwide. Hashtags like #HopeForTomorrow and #BarronTrumpForChange began trending on every platform. The response was overwhelming, and with it came an outpouring of support from unexpected corners. As Barron sat in the White House media room, his phone buzzed constantly with messages and notifications. Carla's story had touched millions, and Mia's resilience inspired countless others to come forward with their own experiences. The scale of the issue became more apparent than ever. "Barron, CNN wants to interview you tonight," said Stephanie, one of the press coordinators. "I'll do it," Barron replied without hesitation. "But I want Mia and Carla to join me. Their voices are the ones people need to hear." That evening, Barron, Carla, and Mia sat under the glaring lights of a major news studio. The anchor began with a question directed at Barron. "Why is this issue so important to you?" Barron looked directly into the camera. "Because it's not just an issue, it's a crisis. And it affects everyone, our mothers, sisters, daughters. It's time we listen, learn, and act. Carla shared her journey of escaping a violent situation, and Mia spoke about how she had been silenced for years. Their courage moved millions watching from their homes. Back at the White House, Barron convened a task force with top lawmakers, experts, and advocates. He personally reached out to organizations across the country, urging them to collaborate on the initiative. "We need immediate reform," Barron said during one of the meetings. "We can't just talk about change, we have to make it happen." Elon Musk reached out with an offer to fund a nationwide safety program. Celebrities began donating to shelters, while tech companies promised to create platforms to help victims find resources and report abuse safely. Meanwhile, Barron's dedication began inspiring a movement among young people. Schools started organizing rallies, and students launched social media campaigns to raise awareness. One night, as Barron reviewed reports in his room, his father entered. "You've done something incredible here," Donald Trump said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You've given people hope." Barron looked up. "This is just the beginning, Dad. We have so much more to do." The White House was a whirlwind of activity. Barron Trump, now the face of a movement that had taken the nation by storm, sat at his desk with a newfound determination. He had listened to countless stories of pain, resilience, and hope over the past few days. Every account added fuel to his resolve to create meaningful change. Barron, began his chief advisor, Mrs. Carter, "The media is divided. Some praise your efforts, while others claim this is a publicity stunt. The opposition is mounting." "I don't care about the politics," Barron replied, his voice steady. "This isn't about headlines, it's about lives. Let them criticize. We're going forward." The conversation was interrupted by a knock. A young aide entered, holding a stack of letters. "These are from children across the country, thanking you for speaking up," the aide said, placing the pile on the desk. Barron picked up a letter at random. It was from a 9-year-old girl in Ohio. Her words were simple but powerful. "Thank you for being brave. I hope I can feel safe at school again someday." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his pocket. That afternoon, Barron attended a high-stakes meeting with lawmakers and social activists. The room was tense, filled with people who had differing opinions on how to tackle the growing crisis. "We need stricter laws," one activist argued. "Education and awareness campaigns are the key," countered another. Barron listened intently, his hands clasped. "Why not both?" he asked, breaking the heated exchange. "We need immediate action to protect children, but we also need long-term solutions to change the culture that allows such atrocities to happen." His words silenced the room. Slowly, heads began to nod. By evening, Barron addressed the nation in a televised speech. Standing at the podium, his face lit with determination, he said, "This isn't about politics or power. It's about humanity. Together, we can build a world where every child feels safe and valued. I'm asking for your help, not as the son of a former president, but as a fellow human being who believes in a better tomorrow." The response was immediate. Social media buzzed with messages of support. Hashtags like #HopeWithBarron and #ProtectOurFuture began trending worldwide. The tide was turning, but Barron knew the journey was far from over. His vision was clear, and his heart was steadfast. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Barron Trump's speech resonated far and wide, sparking conversations in households, schools, and even the highest levels of government. Across the country, people began sharing their own stories of pain, resilience, and hope. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #HopeWithBarron and #ProtectOurFuture, as people rallied behind his vision for a safer America. In the days following his address, Barron found himself inundated with messages of support. Some came from influential figures, offering resources and advice, while others came from everyday citizens, inspired to join the cause. But amidst the overwhelming support, Barron also faced skepticism and criticism from those who doubted his ability to drive meaningful change. One morning, as Barron reviewed a letter from a senator pledging support for stricter legislation, his phone buzzed with a call from a small-town sheriff in Montana. The sheriff recounted a recent case involving a young girl who had survived a horrific attack. "She watched your speech," the sheriff said, his voice thick with emotion. "She told me it gave her the courage to tell her story." Deeply moved, Barron realized the magnitude of his actions. He wasn't just advocating for policy changes, he was giving victims a voice. That afternoon, Barron convened a meeting with his team, urging them to focus on grassroots initiatives that would empower communities to address the issue at its core. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of Texas, the 12-year-old girl who had first approached Barron watched his progress on TV. Her eyes sparkled with hope as she saw people coming together, united by the promise of a safer tomorrow. But not everyone was pleased. Behind closed doors, powerful individuals with vested interests in maintaining the status quo began plotting ways to undermine Barron's efforts. Unbeknownst to him, his crusade for justice was about to face its greatest challenge yet. Barron Trump's movement had gained national momentum. Across the country, rallies were being held, petitions were signed, and people united to fight for the protection of children. Yet, amid all this progress, Barron felt the weight of responsibility like never before. It was a rainy evening in Washington, D.C., when Barron was summoned to meet an influential senator. He entered the grand office, where the walls were lined with bookshelves and American flags stood tall in the corners. The senator, an older man with a stern face softened by a warm smile, extended his hand. "Barron, your work is remarkable," the senator began. "But with great influence comes great challenges. You must be prepared for opposition." Barron nodded, but he couldn't help but ask, "What kind of opposition, sir?" The senator leaned forward, his tone serious. "There are people who profit from the very systems you're trying to change. They will stop at nothing to keep things as they are. You'll face media attacks, attempts to discredit you, even threats. Are you ready for this?" Barron took a deep breath. "I'm ready, sir. This isn't about me. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves." The senator smiled again, this time with admiration. "You have a brave heart, young man. But remember, even bravery needs support. Build your allies wisely." The next day, Barron's fears became reality. Social media was flooded with fabricated stories and false accusations against him. Some news channels questioned his intentions, while others outright dismissed his efforts as a publicity stunt. Despite the noise, Barron stood firm. He knew that the truth would prevail, but it wouldn't be easy. His team worked tirelessly to counter the misinformation, organizing press conferences and releasing heartfelt videos of Barron addressing the public directly. At one such conference, Barron stood before a crowd of reporters. His voice was steady, but his eyes reflected his determination. "I'm not here for fame or recognition," he declared. "I'm here to give a voice to those who've been silenced. This isn't a fight for me, it's a fight for justice." The room erupted in applause, and as the clip went viral, public support surged once again. But Barron knew the battle was far from over. That evening, as he sat in his room reviewing letters from supporters, he found one that caught his eye. It was from the same girl who had initially approached him in the park. "Dear Barron," it read, "I heard about what you're going through, and I want you to know that you're not alone. You gave me hope when I needed it most, and now I want to give you hope. Keep fighting. You're making a difference. Baron felt a renewed sense of purpose. The words of a 12-year-old reminded him why he had started this journey. He wasn't just fighting for her, he was fighting for every child who deserved a safe and happy future. And so, with the world watching and challenges mounting, Baron prepared for the next phase of his mission.
The press conference room was filled to capacity, with journalists, photographers, and representatives from various organizations all eager to hear from Baron Trump. The atmosphere was electric, and the room buzzed with whispers and anticipation. As the young Trump stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent, all eyes on him. Baron began, his voice steady yet impassioned. In the past weeks, I've had the privilege of speaking with many of you, listening to your concerns, and understanding the challenges we face together. It's clear that change isn't just necessary, it's urgent. This isn't about politics or personal gain. This is about the safety and future of our nation's children. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. The reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and the audience hung on his every word. He then shared the story of the brave 12-year-old girl, whose courage had sparked this movement. Her voice, he said, was a testament to the resilience and strength of the next generation. Baron unveiled a comprehensive plan, a collaborative effort between local communities, federal agencies, and private organizations to combat the rising tide of violence and abuse. It included enhanced funding for education, stricter penalties for perpetrators, and a nationwide awareness campaign. He emphasized the importance of prevention and support systems, urging everyone to play their part. As he concluded, the room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering for the young leader who had managed to bring a deeply divisive issue into the spotlight. Backstage, Baron was greeted by the senator, who patted him on the shoulder. "You've done well, son. You've given people hope." Despite the overwhelming support, Baron knew the journey ahead would be challenging. However, he was ready. He had taken the first step, and the nation was beginning to rally behind him.
Thank you for watching Elite Unfolded, where we unravel the untold and unfold the extraordinary. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more captivating tales. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, we'd love to hear from you.